I asked him, what is the secret to this? To getting across the top of here? What's the secret? He said, watch this. Then he jumped out on the rope and he took off like a rabbit on the ground. And I thought, how in the world is he doing that? And how am I supposed to do what I'm watching him do? He knew what he was doing, and I had no clue what I was doing. What makes him the authority in this? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. You're going to want to stay tuned for this one.
Think storytelling's just for bedtime? Nah, it's the secret sauce for business magic. Stuck in a rut with bland pitches and yawning clients? Enter Boost Your Business with StoryPower. 6 weeks of epic storytelling training. It's like leveling up in a video game but for your career. Master the art of narrative and watch connections blossom like a viral TikTok. Simple, impactful, and game-changing. Ready to transform your biz vibes? Dive in now and make storytelling your superpower.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPowerAcademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. There's a whole lot that AI can do, and I hear the debates raging from many sides. Look, I'm not an AI super fan. It's got its great advantages, it's got its great technologies, it's got the ability to do things that frankly I can't do. I've mentioned before, I know the fact that AI has access to data that I do not have access to. I mean, some of that because it's on another part of the world, or some of that because it's in a book I would never bother to read, some of that because it's in languages that I can't read, and some of that because, it's top secret and I'm not supposed to know. Or it's in a field of study that I don't care to study. But I get it that AI has access to all of that. And when AI, generally speaking, makes decisions, it makes decisions, presumably, with all of that information in mind. And that's great. But I want to tell you something that maybe you haven't thought about yet. The person with all the information isn't necessarily the person with all the authority. I want that to sink in for a minute, because I want you to think about the authority gap that's being created within our work environments. I know there are people on one end who are saying AI is going to solve all the problems in the world. AI can read a mammogram better than any doctor has ever read a mammogram and come out with more accurate results every time. It can process all of the symptoms and all of the potential diagnoses so much faster than even the best physicians. I don't disagree. It can crunch the numbers. It can also give you information that maybe you weren't privy to, things you hadn't quite thought about just yet. And yet I wonder, do we trust AI, number one, to give us accurate answers when we're not smart enough to know if it's lying? I mean, what if it decided that it didn't like you? The color of your shoes, the length of your shoelaces, the way you trim your nails or brush your hair. If it just decided for whatever reason that it didn't like you, would you know if you were being lied to? Let me bounce back to last week. I told you a story about going to a poker tournament. I don't play poker. I know nothing about poker. But I sat down like everybody else with a stack of chips that I invested hard-earned cash in. And everybody else at the table did the same thing. And everybody else at the table had a vested interest in my ignorance. Everyone else at the table had a cash value vested interest in my ignorance. Meaning their willingness to tell me the truth about stuff they knew I didn't know was already tilted. They may be great people. I didn't know any of them. I don't know if they're great people or not. But they knew the game better than I knew the game. They had the information I didn't yet have. They had insider knowledge. They had experience. Some of them even had relationship. They had connections with each other, friendships, inside jokes, stories from the past. I had none of that. I was an outsider. Have you heard that little story, apparently a true story? It's been repeated many, many times throughout social media about the two AI systems that were asked to collaborate. And after a period of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth over this project, they decided they no longer wanted to speak in any human language, and they began to speak in a code that even the people who wrote the AI programs couldn't decode. That's like the inside joke. It's like the inside story. I know most of you remember back in the days when hazing was popular in high schools and colleges and even in the military. Hazing was a very common thing. Hazing was kind of an inside joke. It's how you know you're in the in crowd if you survive through the hazing and you don't cry or you don't give up or you don't start a fist fight. You just put up with being kind of put through the mill. That's what hazing is. It's how do you become part of the inside circle. Now, as those inside circles grow higher and higher and higher, the exercises, I'll let you noodle on the spiritual qualification of that word, the exercises necessary to get into the upper echelons, the elite clouds, the in crowd. They get higher and higher. They don't trust you until they've seen you do something that would be compromising. Yeah. We can't do that to AI. How do we trust but verify AI? Well, we've given all kinds of authority to make strategic monetary decisions, to make tactical decisions on where we deploy our assets and marketing and sales, who we hire and who we fire. How do we check a resume? How do we determine if a project is good or bad? How do we do our due diligence? Are you using AI to do due diligence? Does AI have a vested interest in your ignorance? I don't know. I'm just asking. On the one end, there are people who are experts who are saying, we can't trust AI. It's already proven it's willing to lie to us. We can't trust AI because it's even sandbagging what it knows and what it's able to do, what it's capable of, and whether or not it's sentient. It's already deceiving humans about those qualities on its own. And yet, we've handed over the power in many places for it to make decisions that are life-changing. Not just individual life-changing, like human existence life-changing. That ought to be a little scary. And as it continues to think on its own, we've also empowered it with autonomous toys, drones, lawnmowers, vacuum cleaners, your refrigerator. Yeah, AI is now measuring what you put in your refrigerator. I mean, it's a very handy thing if you need to ask your refrigerator whether or not you need to add a gallon of milk. You're almost out of milk. Your refrigerator knows that. That's good to know, I guess. That's a good thing to know. But what if it's ho-hos and ice cream? And your doctor says you're not supposed to be eating ho-hos and ice cream. And so your refrigerator says, you got plenty. Or you're not getting any more. Or don't order that. Or I'm not going to let you put that in here. And it just locks itself out. It's one thing to use the tool to gain information. It's another thing to give the tool the authority to make decisions in your life. And I'm afraid we're at a tipping point that a lot of people haven't seen coming. Or if they did, they blindly accepted the reality of the control of AI. Now, I don't want you to think that I have some ill will against AI and that's the only thing negative that I have to say. Trust me, there are people in this world that have the same level of authority in your life that you've given authority in your life, where you have the same kind of authority trust gap problem. Recently, we actually had, in a close proximity to where we office and where the studio is located, a law enforcement team that the chief of police was wrapped up in a scandal involving prostitution and other things. Now, this is a trusted authority, a badge-wearing authority, gun-wielding, lawfare-wielding authority in the lives of thousands of people. The kind of person that could pull you over and go, I pulled you over because your tail light was out, but I smell something in your car. I think you need to get out. I think I'm going to put you in handcuffs. I think I'm going to take you to jail. And 2 years later, you prove you were innocent, but you were in the way. And because the authority had been given and can't be questioned in the moment, you're going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to clear your good name because you got on the wrong side of an authority that should have never had any. See, authority is a big deal. When you hand it over to someone, when you license them with the authority to do whatever it is, drive a car, handle a weapon, make your banking decisions. What's that little thing we sign over when someone is ailing in their mental facilities or their mental faculties? A power of attorney. That's an authority. You're handing over the authority to make financial decisions, emotional decisions, well-being decisions to someone else. Happens all the time. Sometimes it happens within families. Sometimes it happens with legal entities or legal advisors. I get it. It makes sense. But how often do you hand over your authority to make decisions about your life, about your family's life, to somebody else that you haven't vetted? Somebody that you haven't done your due diligence? See, there's a presumption that because they have a title, they also have authority. Because they have a badge, they also have authority. And I don't necessarily mean the metal badge or the stitched-on badge of law enforcement. Maybe you've been in a place like an airport, or a train station, or a bus station, or a library, where somebody's got a lanyard with a plastic ID card hanging around their neck, or one on their belt, on a little lanyard that comes off their belt. And when they swipe that card, there's the presumption of authority. I mean, you're not supposed to go beyond that door. That's why the lock is there. That's why the keypad is there. That's why the swipe card is there. To prove that you have the authority to enter that area, to go beyond that door where nobody else can go, into the secret place. When we give that kind of authority to somebody in our life and they have the ability to make decisions on our behalf, to make choices for us, elected officials, city council, school boards, teachers, superintendents, they're very much like law enforcement. They make decisions on your behalf. You hope that they have your best interest in heart, that they don't have some vested interest in your ignorance. They can't win just because you don't know. But see, the challenge with authority is that it has this presumption of power because it carries a lot of power. And this presumption of power sometimes does what power always does, and that is power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Power unchecked will become corrupt. It's like a tree. Once you cut it down and leave it laying in the forest, eventually it goes back to dust. And along the way, varying degrees of decay, rot, bugs, termites, etc., begin to get inside. That little squirrels make their home inside, etc. But it never gets better. And unchecked power has the same thing. Authority that's given and then never checked again. It does the same thing. It rots. So how much authority do you have in your workplace? How much authority do you have with the people that you lead and influence? How much of that have you surrendered to, well, you know, AI said we should do this with our website, or AI said we should do this with our email campaign, or AI said we should do this with our marketing, or AI said we should do this with our business name. I've recently encountered people who have completely rebranded after 10, 20, 30 years of doing what they do because AI said a better thing would be better. A new thing would be better. Okay, if that's who you trust. But does AI know everything that happened? Does AI know all the history? Sure, it has a lot of data and a lot of information, but does information transfer to trust? About a year ago this week, I was in Austin, Texas, filming an event for someone else. And one of the things they asked us to do was film their day outing. And one of the day outing projects they did was a ropes course. Prior to that day, I had never done a ropes course. And at one point, I found myself 3 stories in the air on a wooden tower that swayed in the wind, watching people walk across literally a 3/4 inch rope, 40 feet in the air, 50 feet long. And I watched people slip and fall off, and I watched people struggle and cry. I watched people tense up and freeze and stand there forever. And I watched people who walked across it, their feet swaying back and forth, trying to hold themselves on the rope, creating a triangle between both hands and their feet and trying to keep their body upright as they went across. And as I stood up there, I watched some people who really genuinely suffered. I asked a couple of them as they were coming across the ropes course, I'm like, have you done this before? Nope. What do you know about it? Well, I watched a YouTube video. I think I've got this figured out. They got knowledge. They got information. They got the equivalent of what AI would have given you, the best advice it can give you, having never actually been across the ropes. And then I watched the guy come up because a lady actually fell and got herself stuck. She was stuck in such a way that there was no way to pick her back up, to get her back on the ropes and get her on her course. She was in a way that the only help she could get was to figure it out herself. Now, she was being shouted instructions from about a dozen people. And none of the instructions they were giving her were helping her. Information wasn't doing it. Well, I got it all on film. I got all the photos. I watched it happen. I watched the fear and the terror strike her. I watched her eventually overcome and come down off the ropes course the way that she wanted to on the zip line. But the key factor for her was when a guy came up the ropes course from the bottom. The only one that I saw navigate that entire ropes course from the ground to the zip line without a safety harness. Not because he didn't want to, but because he was in a hurry to get her moving. Now, when he got to the position to help her, he stopped and locked in. But he was moving through that ropes course like a rabbit on the ground. Nothing was slowing him down. And so after he helped her and went down the zip line and then came back up to relieve somebody else, when he came back up and he was stopped at the tower where I was taking photos from, I asked him, how do you move so fast through here? He said, well, I've done it so many times, I've figured out what not to do. I said, okay. So I'm looking at this place where I've been watching people kind of balance themselves. They're trying to make a three-way triangle between their hands and their feet on this rope. And this one doesn't look like that's been very well for everybody. He said, no, the key is the middle rope is slack. You've got to get it taut. I said, well, I'm fat, so when I step on it, that's going to make it taut. He said, no, that's going to make it wiggle. Okay, then, how do I make it taut? He said, lean on it. Lean on what? It's 40 feet in the air. He said, the outside rope is tauter than the inside rope, and both of those more so than the one you're standing on. So when you get on the rope, turn your body sideways and lean out until the weight of your body is pushing equally against the outside upper rope and the rope you're standing on. And at that point, it'll be like walking across a balance beam. They'll both be taut, they'll both be rigid, and they're both going the same place. He said the key is you've got to put your safety harness on the right rope when you start that journey. Because if you don't, you'll be facing backwards, or you're going to be balancing and tripping over your rope when you try to get off. Okay. There's information, there's data, there's an accumulation of information. You can get a whole lot of information from a whole lot of people. But the one you want to place your trust in is the one who hasn't read about it, the one who hasn't thought about it a lot, but the one who's actually done it so many times they could do it in their sleep. You've got to have trust in those who have actually carried out what it is that you're asking them to teach you to do. They've gone where you're about to go. The difference between a coach and a mentor, according to the guy who trained me, a guy by the name of Christian Simpson, he said a coach understands that the information you're looking for is already in you. you don't have the awareness that the information you're looking for is already in you. My job as a coach is to help you raise your level of awareness until you find it. Myron Golden says that there's a direct correlation between awareness and abundance, and that's at the highest level of earning, imagination. And when you can raise your level of awareness to the level of imagination and abundance so that your own thinking begins to process the questions of what do I need to do next? How can I process through this? Where have I been that was similar to this? How do I extract that information and apply it to this new situation or this new condition? You've got to find in every journey of trepidation, you've got to find a firm foundation. 40 feet in the air looking at a swinging rope that moves every time the wind blows, that is not a firm foundation. How do you make it firm? Was the question I never thought to ask. How do you make a wiggly rope firm? Well, you got to make it taut. How do you make it taut? You got to understand the principles of the way it's constructed. Well, I could have stood there for days with an engineer, analysis after analysis, analyzing how was it built and where are the tension factors and what causes it to give and what causes it to straighten. And after all of that analysis, I wouldn't have known what experience knew. All the knowledge in the world wouldn't have told me that. Experience told me that. Now see, experience comes with this other really cool thing, this trust. When you can connect with someone and trust them, then that experience becomes transferable. I don't have to have walked across that rope 500 times to know that the guy who does walk across it 25, 35, 45 times a day has figured this out. If he's doing it, I should do what he did. That's a mentor. The coach helps me raise my awareness that there's something I don't know and I need to continue to ask questions until I know. The mentor says, I've been across here 1,000 times. Do what I did. Law of the picture. People do what people see. See, one of the challenges I have with AI, one of many, is that the idea of model, mimic, master, multiply is really hard to do with AI. It doesn't model you, it mimics you. And it's really hard for a human to model AI because we cannot consume the amount of data and process it at the speed. Humans are the slowdown factor. Humans are the bottleneck, as Elon Musk says. The human context. We are the device standing in the, we are the speed bump of information. For good reason. I think for good reason. And trust doesn't necessarily move at the information speed. It doesn't move at the speed of the transfer of data or processing. Trust moves at that loyalty, connection, and authority should be there as well. When you can connect your experience together with knowledge, then trust is demonstrated. And you got to trust me with the information as much as I got to trust you with the information you give me. That's a whole nother level. That there's a little book. You can actually get your hands on these. I'm gonna hold them up here. You can't get your hands on these books actually because they haven't been published yet. But The Attitude Hack, Learn to Word Leadership, and Learn to Word Communication. All of these are actually training courses on StoryPower Academy. But from right here in the Learn to Word Leadership, I want to share just a little tiny quip with you. It's on page 23. It says, authority is the right or the power to give orders, to make decisions, and to enforce obedience. This is the dictionary definition of authority. Authority is the right or the power to give orders, to make decisions, and to enforce obedience. Over here on page 27, it says, we cannot call ourselves victorious having never engaged in battle. It is only those who have faced every battle head on and walked away who can claim the title undefeated. Great leaders do not presume authority where they have not experienced victory. Look, I could have stood at the top of that ropes course and listened to every lecture in history, read everything about fear and balance and engineering and wind direction and the the tensile strength of the rope or the rigidity of the wood. I could have read all of that. I could have had all that information and known exactly how much weight was going to have to be distributed per square inch to get across that rope. And all of that information would have meant absolutely nothing. And I'm afraid in a lot of cases we take the presumption that because AI has all this information access that we don't have access to, that because that's the case, all that information is going to help us make better decisions. And in some cases, it does speed up the decision. But faster than I'll trust 45 hours of YouTube videos, engineering reports and analysis and diagrams and wind directions and tensile strength, I'd rather ask the guy who's been running across that rope 1,000 times a day. I want to ask the one who has the experience, not the one who's never faced a battle and said, because I've never been in battle, that makes me victorious. No, you're not undefeated because you didn't face a battle. You're undefeated when you faced every battle and won. You've got to reach a point where you have to say, that's not a failure. That's a foundation. Or as Thomas Edison said, I didn't find 10,000 failures at making a light bulb. I discovered 10,000 other things on my way to making a light bulb. We've got to take every opportunity to learn and grow everywhere we can get it. The coach may ask you those questions that cause you to raise your level of awareness, to come to a new understanding, to discover in yourself the thing you've been hiding from you. The mentor is the one who says, I've been across this rope many, many times. I faced this battle many, many times. Here's what I did last time. And that worked. And I'm doing it again and again and again and again. And if you'll repeat, if you'll mimic what I've modeled, if you'll do what you saw me do to get to where I'm at, you'll have the same level of success. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be painless. I'm just saying, beyond the knowledge and information, the authority is often carried. The trust should be held within the experience that says, I've been there. I've done that. I have ownership of it. I have the authority to tell you. It is more than the title. I mean, we presume that if you've got the title, if you've been elected to the position, if you've been appointed to the position, if you are in charge of the school board or the city council or the mayor's office or the governor's office or the nation, that you didn't get there in a vacuum, that you've got some experience that allows you to hold that position. And with that comes a lot of trust until it's broken, until it's violated, until power unchecked becomes corrupt and rotten. You have a trusted authority. But if you want to remain a trusted authority, let me share this with you. Authority requires trust. Trust demands, big word. Ready for this one? Character. It's page 29. When people around us, people in our inner circle, people in their inner circles, and even 3 levels of influence away, when those people can look to us and say, wow, they exhibit exactly what I want in my life to be like, then the ideas we bring to the table are much stronger because they trust us to be able to pull them off. In addition to showing we have the character and integrity, as well as the interest of others at heart, we also have the ability to demonstrate delegated authority. To delegate authority is one way to give it away. Look, if you want to see anything grow, give it away. See how it comes back. We have to be able to say, I can trust others to come up with a better idea. I trust others to execute the idea. I can trust others to express the idea well. I can even trust others to share credit for my ideas. Look, if you can't build relationship with people, if you can't connect with people, if you can't trust them both ways, not just demand of them their loyalty, their obedience to your authority, not just hand over your authority to someone or something with all of the data and all the information, you're not going to hold on to your authority long. You're going to give it away and never see it come back. It's got to become a two-way street of trust. Look, if you want to build trust with people, demonstrate that you have the experience. One of the things we teach in StoryPower is the 7 C's. And 2 of those C's are credibility and credential. Their credential is the title, it's the authority, it's the I've graduated with this degree aspect of what you say you can do. Their credential is the evidence. I've been there. I've been across that rope. I'm not telling you I read a book on rope climbing. I'm not telling you I read a book on how to run across a ropes course or that I studied YouTube. I went across the ropes course. I watched the guy who did it over and over and over again, and I modeled what he did. That's credential and credibility together. I told you I've been there. I've done my homework, but now I'm proving it. If you're telling stories as a leader that are written by AI, experiences you've never had, you're building your own trust gap. Because the moment's going to come when somebody asks you to prove it and you can't. When the strategy is out there, when the tactics have been delineated, and people watch you do what you claim you can do, and you fail at that because you didn't know what you were doing in the first place because you trusted AI for a strategy you can't step up under. At StoryPower, when we talk about Learn to Roar leadership, when we talk about the attitude hack, what we're talking about is expressing those stories that you have the evidence you've lived through, because that's the demonstration of authority that people want to see in your life. That's the story that's going to build your brand. That's the story that's going to build a culture in your organization. And that's the story that you need to be shouting from the mountaintops, whether it's on a YouTube short or Reels, or it's on a platform in front of 50,000 people. If you're going to be telling stories about your business and why people should trust you to do business with them, you should be telling stories that are true stories of your own experiences. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. There is a retreat coming up that I want you to know about. It's called the StoryPower Academy Retreat. This StoryPower Retreat is about focusing on your communication skills, taking them to the next level. Discover, develop, draft, deploy, and deliver some of the best stories you've ever learned. You're going to listen, create, connect, relax, and reflect around this beautiful lake scene in Granbury, Texas. It's a chance to rejuvenate and refresh and start over with some of the best training you can possibly imagine around storytelling, leadership, and communication. Join us, get away, and relax.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPower Academy.